It's all about having the key insights, following the leaders of the crypto industry and background stories on blockchain technology trends to keep you one step ahead. Monty Metzger, CEO of LCX.com, keeps you up to speed with what's moving global crypto markets and gives you the latest insights about LCX's platform and ecosystem. This is LCX Insights Live.
So welcome to this special LCX Insights Live. I'd like to welcome you all here on YouTube, Twitter, and LinkedIn. And then we have an in-person audience. Just cheer a little bit. Okay. So they're real. We didn't pay them to come. They're all here because they wanted to learn something about LCX and our special guests. So today it's all about the platform FinTech revolution. And we have Don Tapscott with us. And before we start, I wanted to give you a short overview about LCX, where do we stand, and we'll take some questions, but this time only here from this room, and then we'll sum up and have a good evening here. So thanks for coming. Before I start, I have to take this off because it's LCX time, and I always show up in the same clothes because I don't have time to think about anything when I get up in the morning. So I have plenty of these ones. And then I start working. So let me go into the presentation. So LCX is all about the vision that we believe blockchain is the new operating system for the new financial world. So that's the underlying layer, and that's where we all got started with the idea. And you know, the World Economic Forum predicted that there will be $8 trillion being locked and stored in blockchain networks by 2027. We're getting closer to it. We're now hearing the word trillion for the first time. And LCX is there, which stands for Liechtenstein Crypto Asset Exchange. We are building a financial ecosystem for crypto and fiat, the old money, alike, to become the new category leader in the digital asset economy. So with that said, there was a smart guest we had at one of our previous LCX Insights Live sessions, which we hosted in Liechtenstein, who said, LCX is one of the most important companies in the space and in the world. And we are happy to have him, Mr. Don Tapscott, with us today in person. We also had another guest during that event, which was Prince Michael of Liechtenstein, who also says blockchain is a disruptive technology which will change the financial industry. And he also told me a story about why he went into blockchain and Bitcoin and why he was interested. So he was invited to a very special event by bankers and central bankers. And then suddenly somebody was talking about Bitcoin. And he realized that in the audience, they were pale, they were afraid, they were scared. And then the next day he bought his first Bitcoins because he thinks if there's something which can make these bankers scared and afraid about, then there's something behind it. Of course, this was pretty early days, so now a lot of things changed. And so how did LCX start? The whole idea started on this famous napkin, which I drew 2017. But what I didn't tell you yet is that the day after this great presentation about our vision and what we could do and everything, I took my phone out and I called one of CEOs of a large bank, but I didn't know him. So I ended up in the secretary and I said, I need to meet this person. I want to pitch him an idea, basically saying we need to talk about Bitcoin, blockchain, and everything. And what was surprising for me is I got this meeting and I showed up a couple of hours later with this fancy presentation. I pulled it out of my jacket and I presented it to him, talking about what we could do, talked about stable coins, about Bitcoin mining, about exchanges. And obviously LCX decided to build a key infrastructure, which is the transacting platform to exchange crypto and to build a regulatory framework, which is so powerful that we can grow it over years and eventually not only trade these so-called non-security and utility tokens, but also security tokens, regulated digital assets. So what kind of journey did we have so far? So we first launched in June 2019 a trading terminal called LCX Terminal, which we started to get traders interacting with our platform to sign up. And also it's a powerful tool because you can connect to a lot of different trading venues where you need to have an account, but then you can manage your whole portfolio across these venues on one platform. That's how we started. We learned a lot about prices, data generation, how do these exchanges work? How can we work with their APIs, their connections and everything together? And it's still a very powerful tool, which we are growing step by step. But then some time passed and we spent a lot of money and time and nerves and everything to get to this point where we got the approval for 8 blockchain registrations in Liechtenstein. And there I have to point out again, Liechtenstein really stands out because it's the first country who has a regulatory framework for blockchain businesses, from the token generation to token trading to token prices, for example, and then also the whole backend, like the identification of investors and so on. So that's pretty smart, and we got 8 out of 11 which are out there, and with that basis, we have more than any other company in the country. So a few days later, we launched the LCX Exchange. This was January 5th, 2020. So our current exchange platform is now 11 months old. Still, there's like lots of way to improve, but we are pretty proud of the development so far, with like a lot of tokens being listed, thousands of users being signed up, being verified. And of course, the whole infrastructure around it is all built up from the ground. So there's no perfect solution if you want to do know your customer, investor identification. We actually had to build something from scratch, which works first of all on the regulation side, so that we are fulfilling all these regulatory regimes and requirements, and on the other side, which is still like light framed and easy to use and these things. So LCX Exchange is a key part. And we didn't stop there. Like at Start at LCX, we already started to build out a powerful ecosystem. So here you can see kind of key partners, like over the time, some had been joining. So one element is, of course, the Blockchain Research Institute, which is dear to my heart because it's also working with Don Tapscott and the whole team over there. We're actually using this to educate our team a lot. So the Blockchain Research Institute is a powerful educational library of tools like what is blockchain, how does it work, and these things. So we have some people joining us from compliance and banking sector who are not perfectly known about all these things. So that's why we're using that a lot. But then there are other kind of important partners, like in the crypto compliance space, some tools like blockchain analytics, elliptic. Then we have some like legal and supporters. We are audited by Grant Thornton, for example. And then we have some on the kind of infrastructure side, things like Parity, better known as Polkadot, Constellation, Monero, Cello, a very exciting international company as well as Icon, who was a partnership we did quite early on with the Korean ecosystem. So with that ecosystem partners, it's important to learn. But then on the other side, we define clear goals. And so these are long-term. So we did announcement of the partnership, which is exciting, but even more exciting for me and for the whole team is that to show what we can do together. So for example, with Hedera Hashgraph and Polkadot, we're working on security token standards, something which we call the Liechtenstein Protocol, which is a new technology standard to enable security token trading in a compliant and regulated manner. And that's something which we want to bring cross-chain, cross-blockchain, so into Polkadot, into Hedera, and so on. So that's super important. And then recently, as you might have all seen, is we got listed at Coinbase. This was a partnership or like a listing which had been built up for over a long period of time. We had been engaging with the Coinbase team for almost 10 months, I would say. It started out with the announcement of the support of Coinbase custody. So LCX token is now available to all the institutional investors. If you want to sign up at Coinbase custody, you have to bring at least $500,000 to $1 million to be accepted there. But once you're there, you can then also store your LCX token, our utility token. And then we got listed on Coinbase Pro, and then a few days later on Coinbase as well. So that's an exciting moment for us, most importantly because of the reach and the power of the Coinbase platform at the moment. And they also share this vision with us on the regulatory side and on security tokens, which is fascinating. And yeah, with that, like the US market is important, I think, besides the Asian and European market, one of the key drivers of the blockchain and crypto industry, especially now with Bitcoin, NFT is going nuts in the US, very, very exciting. What we did this year also is launching LCX Mobile. I can tell you we are listening to all the feedback from the community with the first iteration of our Android app. There's iOS obviously coming and some other updates where we'll share some infos soon. For us, LCX Mobile is not only an app, but really a new product category, because with like mobile first approach, everybody is working from the smartphones at the moment. There are a lot of users who never logged in from a desktop, which we noticed. And our whole platform, everything is mobile ready since start. Nevertheless, the app is something which is critical, and there we can do a lot of things much better, including selfies, for example, which works much smoother. And then we had been working on this regulatory framework, which I told you, with the licenses and everything. Now it gets very exciting because we can do a lot of cool things with it. And one element which we recently announced is actually a Dutch team behind. And we have some Dutch people here from Netherlands, so you might be excited as well. The company is called DigiCore Labs. They have entities in the Netherlands as well as in Liechtenstein as the operational hub. And they decided to work with us to do a token sale in a compliant manner. So what does this mean and why is it important? Basically, all the token sales you've seen in the past are trying to behave in a way and try to follow some laws which are there. But there's no legal framework like there is in Liechtenstein. And this is the real first compliant token sale leveraging our licenses. So we did the token generation. We are now taking care about the identity service as an identity service provider, about all the identification of the buyers, the token investors, and that's necessary. And so you want to know where it's issued and sold. We did the issuance of the token on the blockchain, and we're now doing the whole token sale process on our token sale manager. And the next step, once that's been started for everybody, there will be a public sale. So that will be very exciting for the community to participate with 3 different stages, three different models. And after that, it will be listed at our platform as well. So that's super exciting. Another very exciting project is called Diamonds. And there we are tokenizing diamonds. So how do we do this? So we bought 100 diamonds, actually not far from here in Zurich at a specialist, and to make sure that we have all the certificates needed on the diamond side. And we put them in a high security vault in Liechtenstein and lock them up. And what we've now preparing is the launch of NFTs, non-fungible tokens. So one of these tokens will represent the full ownership of this diamond. So these are classified as ownership tokens. And as diamonds are commodities, it's also not a security. So it's freely tradable once issued. So we will launch a whole NFT platform for that around diamonds, where people can buy these diamonds, and then you can withdraw them, buy them, and sell them on OpenSea or other NFT platforms. So that's super exciting. But with within asset classing diamonds, we thought we could do more. And a key part is how to educate people about what is tokenization, how does it work, and how do we motivate them to actually go on the platform and try it, bid for the NFTs and everything. So we created something called TIA tokens. So these are, you would say, governance tokens or meme tokens. So they don't have much use beyond kind of the voting system, which is giving every user power to vote for future decisions. But on top of that, it has a function where on every transaction, 10% of the value of the transaction will be given back to the users. So there are actually three steps happening. One is rebalancing, reflection, and burn. So we'll do 5% going back to all other token holders, 2.5% will be burned, and 2.5% will be bought into LCX token. So we thought about this gamified approach a lot. And we believe with the craziness of Dogecoin, SHIB token, Shiba, and all these other ones which are now fighting for the attention, we are in a good position to actually create something where people will ask, like, what is this TIA token? What does it do? That people will be speculating around it. But actually, we want to use this attention for something useful, which is the diamonds in the back. So if you own one of these NFT diamonds, tokenized diamonds, you will earn, or you will be rewarded 1 million TIA tokens over 1 million minutes. So that's roughly 2 years. And just last week, we announced a TIA token airdrop. So we also voted in the community, and everybody was excited about this idea. We as well, and thought, let's give some to our early supporters. So we are dropping 10 million tokens at the Genesis event or around it. So it will be released on January 24th. And to be part of it, you have to sign up at LCX, get verified, and then hold at least 100 LCX token in your main wallet. There's the exchange wallet and there's the main wallet. So in the main wallet, just place it there a little bit. If it's there on Christmas Day this year, you will be honored and granted some of the tokens. And there we actually do calculate all participants, all qualified eligible people divided through the other way around. So all tokens divided through the eligible people. So eventually it might be quite attractive. So to sum it up, what is LCX right now? We have the exchange. We have the LCX terminal as the trading desk for your portfolio. We have LCX DeFi terminal, which I didn't talk about right now. It's a super powerful DEX aggregator, which doesn't get all the attention which it deserves, but it's a great platform. We have the DeFi protocol, which is part of that, with the price oracles, which is also a regulated role and price service provider. We have the STO Launchpad, which is for future tokenized digital assets, which are securities, and the token sale manager, which is now handling the GGMV DigiCorp sales. So with that, that's kind of the summary of LCX and the short update. And now I want to hand over to extend this vision and to take the whole idea about blockchain to the next level. And I'm proud to have Don Tapscott with us. He just gave me this brand new book. It's called Platform Revolution, and it's all about FinTech platform revolution, where LCX is part of, because we are driving innovation on a platform level. We are building the key infrastructure which is needed to enable a revolution. But I know Don since a very, very long time. So we first sat together, I think 2005 or 6 in Munich, when he was still talking about social wikinomics and social media revolution and these things. But since then, we became close friends, and we had been discussing the topics. And then suddenly he held a TED Talk about blockchain. And it's becoming the most famous blockchain-related TED Talk, with now 6.3 million views, growing at a few 100,000 every day. So it's really a tremendous achievement to explain blockchain to the world. But he didn't stop there with this book, and also the service revolution, which he published. It's taking it to the next level. And I'm very proud to have him with him. So Don, the stage is yours. Join us. Here you go.
Thank you. Monty, and I'm delighted to be here, and I really mean that. I'm delighted to be anywhere other than sitting in my house in front of a screen. But I'm on an 8-country speaking tour, and it's quite interesting to note how the pandemic is uneven in different countries and how it constantly changes. Started in Copenhagen with a very large audience, thousands of people, no masks, people partying. And yesterday I was in Austria. As the Western movie says, you better get out of Dodge before things shut down. And that's all shutting down on Monday. But of course, it's been a horrific thing. But the pandemic has also sped up many of the themes of the digital age, I would say, by years, and in some cases by decades. We're all working online and shopping online and entertaining ourselves online. We're learning online, finally, although a lot of what's done there is the old model, just putting a lecture up rather than creating customized, student-focused, interactive learning environments. But, we're ordering food online. But that's just the beginning, because the pandemic has also kind of demonstrated with searing clarity many of the weaknesses of our current systems. Supply chains. How can it be that in 2021, the number one challenge facing the President of the United States, according to him, is the mess with supply chains? How is this possible in this day and age? We can talk about that, Monty, because we're going to have an interactive part. But the pandemic has shown weaknesses in our systems for health data. I mean, the reason that the whole thing took off was because of data or lack thereof. That because our health records are all buried in silos and traditional servers, there's no way to aggregate anonymized health records across a city or a country or the globe to stop a pandemic in its tracks. And the pandemic has also revealed weaknesses in many of our leaders, and they will be or have already been replaced, those who have failed miserably. So this is creating a demand pull for a lot of change in business. One of the things is the pandemic has revealed that money is dirty. Not just dirty in the sense that it's the foundation of organized crime, the drug industry, tax evasion, and all kinds of other things. But cash actually carries viruses around. So the world needs to change. And then, of course, many other big issues. We're in the early days of the effects of climate change. 1 billion people are losing most of their water supply. And even if we pull a miracle off and reduce carbon by 90% in the next 20 years, it's still going to take 1,000 years for the planet to cool down. And in the meantime, some bad things will happen. So we need to bring about change in the world. Now, simultaneous with this demand pull, there's a technology push by an extraordinary new era of technology. And that's what we're here talking about tonight. And I would like to thank Monty and LCX for hosting this. I'm an advisor to the company, full disclosure, and I'm a big believer in the company. And I'd like to just start with a little personal history. By the way, I'll introduce Carolina Forgas, who, among other things, is representing the Blockchain Research Institute in Switzerland. And Carolina, I apologize because the next 7 minutes, you've heard this about 100 times. But going back, for me, here's how I came to all this. I wrote a couple of books in the 1980s that nobody read. I think my mother bought most of the copies. They were like studies in bad timing, fun, maybe over wine. I'll tell you some stories about that. But people basically thought I was full of crap for a decade. I finally wrote a bestseller in the early 1990s. That was Paradigm Shift. It was obviously a big book. But as well, a year later, I wrote The Digital Economy, which they say was the first big seller about the web and business. And 20 years later, I was asked to write the anniversary edition of the digital economy. So I had to think about what's occurred and where are we going. And the book held up pretty well, quite well, actually. But when I started reading those pages, I came to the conclusion that we're really entering a second era of the digital age. You know, for this period of 40 years, we have mainframes, mini computers, PCs, the internet, the web, the mobile web, social media, the cloud, big data, traditional central systems, but networks. And now we're entering into this new era where technology is infusing itself into the physical world, billions and trillions of inert objects that become smart communicating devices or animating the physical world. We have technologies that learn to do things that they weren't programmed to do, AI and algorithms. And I was just doing a session on that yesterday, and the relationship between that and blockchain, another good topic. But I found myself coming to a surprising conclusion that the foundational technology for this entire second era was, in fact, the underlying technology of cryptocurrencies. And the reason is that this technology represents the second era of the internet. And I want to do a very big and a very new thing with you today, but I want to just take a minute to make sure that you understand the way that I think about this whole thing. For 40 years, we've had an internet of information. But if I send you some information, a PDF of this deck, which you're welcome to have, a PowerPoint, you know, an email, a photograph, I'm actually not sending you the information. I'm sending you a copy. Even with a website, I keep the original, right? But when it comes to assets, things that really matter to an economy, to prosperity, things like money, securities, intellectual property, the data in our identities, contracts, deeds, agreements, cultural assets like art or music, votes. A vote's an asset, something of value that belongs to somebody. When it comes to assets, copying those is not a good idea. You don't want someone copying your vote or the song you wrote or your identity. And if I send you 1,000 Swiss francs, it's really important that I don't still have the money, right? So cryptographers have called this a double spend problem for decades. And the way that we manage this problem in our economy is through intermediaries, banks, stock exchanges, credit card companies, transfer agents, escrow agents, now social media companies, and they perform all of the business and transaction logic for every type of commerce. They identify the asset, that's a dollar, that's a franc. They clear and settle transactions, they keep records, and overall they've done a pretty good job, but there are growing problems, which I'm not going to go into now, but they're all being hacked because the technology is wrong. They slow things down. They cost too much. And the really big problem is that they capture our data, and we create the data, but they capture the data, and that results in a whole bunch of very fundamental problems in our economy. Again, Monty, that I'd be happy to talk about. So what if there were not just an internet of information? What if there were an internet of value, some kind of vast global distributed ledger, where anything of value, from money to security to contract to intellectual property to a vote, could be managed, stored, transacted in a secure and private way? Well, that's where Bitcoin comes in. So propitiously in 2008, when the financial industry was crashing, Satoshi Nakamoto solved the double spend problem. And Bitcoin was the first app of a new internet of value, kind of like email was the first app of the internet of information, predating the web. But this is a really extraordinary thing. I've been at this, and I've been pretty lucky calling all the big changes in technology over 4 decades now. And I think this is the biggest, because for the first time in human history, people, organizations can trust each other and can manage, transact, store, move, communicate things of value peer-to-peer. This is amazing. Trust is not achieved by an intermediary. It's achieved by cryptography, collaboration, and some very clever code, which is why Alex, my son Alex, and I call it the trust protocol. This is a native digital medium for value and for trust. Okay, so that's a little context setting. This is a big deal. I was on a panel yesterday at the Drucker Forum, and the topic of the panel was AI. And I said, why don't we talk about an important technology? AI, it's just a bunch of algorithms that help us analyze data. We got a new internet here that's going to fundamentally change the deep structure of the corporation and how we orchestrate capability in society. It's going to transform our supply chains. It can help us attack all kinds of intractable problems in society like climate change. Let's talk about what's really important. So I received a cool reaction from the other panelists, but the audience seemed to dig it. So I don't know if this is going to work because the volume has got to be really up for this. I might have to just, no, I'm not going to mess around. But anyway, I had this great analogy for why I thought blockchains were a secure platform. And I ended up on the John Oliver show, the American comedian, and he had some fun with my analogy. So I'm going to try and play it for you now, and you'll see why I don't use the analogy anymore. No, I'll play it for you later once I figure out how to turn up the volume, okay? Anyway, he says, the analogy was that a blockchain's really hard to hack. It's because it's a highly processed thing. It's sort of like a chicken McNugget. And if you try, it'd be like trying to turn a chicken McNugget back into a chicken. Now, someday somebody's going to be able to do that. But for now, it's going to be tough. He said, hold it. That's a terrible thought. If anyone tries to turn a chicken McNugget back into a chicken, that chicken is going to be bleep up. That chicken's going to be suffering from PTSD and writing haunting poetry about the experience, giving speeches at conferences, the things I saw, my body is whole, but what of my soul? Anyway, it was kind of funny. So Ethereum, so Bitcoin was the first app. Then we have these general purpose platforms that started coming out. Hyperledger from the Linux Foundation, Ethereum, and these look more like the web, where you can build any app that involves assets. Just like on the web, you build any app that involves information. And a key part of the whole story here, the setup, is that we now have smart contracts, agreements between people. And that's a lot of what we do in business. That's what security is. It's a contract. Well, now these dumb contracts can become smart. And it means that they can monitor themselves. They can police themselves. They can self-execute when certain conditions are met. They have a bank inside the contract and so on. And then we have these extraordinary new platforms that are of great interest to me. We'll get to LCX in a sec. But, we've got stuff like Solana, which is a sort of a layer one platform, kind of like Ethereum's got a very strong technical team. Polkadot, along with Cosmos, trying to integrate blockchains together. Cosmos, the internet of blockchains. Polygon, I just was at this extraordinary announcement last night, of a new music platform that's creating NFTs for the music industry, whereby you as a music lover get to choose a song that you think has got a lot of potential and that you really love and invest in the song. And then when the song goes to the moon, you receive a payment for investment. The first one they did, people got a 700% return on the investment in the song. So they use Polygon as the sort of layer two solution for that. One more thought on this is that when all is said and done, there are these three technologies that matter. And over the years, I've coined a number of terms. Some of the terms I've tried to coin were not successful. We'll see if this one sticks. But you heard it here first, you out there in cyberspace. Trivergance, please tweet it. I think it's a really great idea. The convergence of these three very fundamental technologies. And in the center of this is data. And Trivergance represents the second era of the digital age. Everything else is a byproduct or a result of Trivergance. Autonomous vehicles, drones, robots, even the metaverse, virtual realities, and so on. And I did get lucky with the timing of this book. And I got lucky with my co-author too. My experience with co-authors has not always been good. So, but it's helpful when you get a co-author that's smarter than you are and is also probably a better writer. So the book did become the big book. The publisher actually said it's probably sold more copies than all other blockchain books combined. It's now in 20 languages around the world. And it holds up very well, and I'm proud of it. What I'm going to do tonight is to share with you some insights that largely come from Alex and are described initially in this book, Financial Services Revolution, and will be in a new book. You'll be able to pre-order it on Amazon the next couple of weeks, called The Digital Asset Revolution. And it's by Alex with a whole number of pieces from the Blockchain Research Institute. This book came out a year ago. It was the first book to talk about the problem of supply chains in a pandemic. We addressed the pandemic specifically. So and that one came out. Actually, both that book and this book, Platform Revolution, came out as the #1 management books on Amazon.com. So we're very proud of this stuff. Okay, so here's what I want to talk to you about today. So Monty was presenting all of that amazing thing that LCX is doing. And he's mentioning different kinds of tokens and so on. I'm not a biologist, but I am a taxonomy freak. And if there's anything that's made me successful over the years, it's that I see something super complicated that people have difficulty understanding. And I find a language and a taxonomy to describe that phenomenon. So I'm going to present to you today a new taxonomy for thinking about tokens. And the taxonomy says that currencies are actually one type. There are 9 types of tokens. Now, these are not, it's not like a biological taxonomy, which things should be mutually exclusive. But any token, you can say primarily what it is. And for most of them, they fall directly into one of these pots, and that's what they are. So let's start with cryptocurrencies. So Bitcoin's worth $1 trillion. Do you know that that is a greater value than all of the Silicon Valley unicorns since 2008 when Bitcoin was created? The numbers are starting to get really interesting here about digital assets, and starting with cryptocurrencies. And we like to think of as cryptocurrencies, and we weren't the first people to say this, as digital gold. And it's like gold in the sense that there's a finite supply. They're scarce. They take time and money to mine, but they're better than gold because you can move them around, you can store them a lot more easily, and they're infinitely divisible. So you can divide them up. That means that you can use them for payments for almost anything. And the other big difference between Bitcoin and gold is that we still don't know how it's going to be used. It's a way of storing value. It's a medium of exchange, and it has many other uses. Now, Bitcoin was the first of a series of cryptocurrencies that are community-based. That's different than corporate currencies that come from companies like Facebook, although they've basically thrown in the towel on Libra, which was then subsequently called DM. But this is how it all started. It's sort of the mother of all these currencies. Widespread adoption. we've got and different kinds of adoption. So you have big investors like Andreessen Horowitz, the PayPal. You can now do exchanges with Bitcoin. You have big companies like Tesla that use Bitcoin as an asset class as part of their asset management business. There are many, many different types of companies coming at the question of currency, which is a big reason why it's taking off so much. Now, second type of token is called a protocol token. And a good example of this would be Ether. This is not so much a currency, it's a token that enables applications, smart contracts, and other capabilities to exist on a blockchain platform. Now, this is a very big market. I saw Alex presenting to some Canadian bankers once, and he said, what do you think is the most successful Canadian startup ever? Shopify? I don't know, Nortel way back. He says it's Ethereum. And by the way, Ethereum is worth more than every bank in this country combined. These guys haven't even heard of it. And it's bigger than all the Canadian banks. It's the size of JP Morgan. So protocol tokens enable transactions basically to run on the network. They're a way of handling payments in a smart contract. And the growth has been quite extraordinary. The next type of token is called governance tokens. And Monty alluded to Tiamon's that has a governance token side. So the way that these things work is they're basically like buying shares in a corporation. Although unlike a corporation, if you buy shares, you don't really get to participate in the decision making. We just went through this horrific thing in Canada recently where a good friend of mine, Joe Natali, the CEO of Rogers, the largest mobile company, that a family member of the family that controls 97% of the voting shares decided he didn't like Joe and carried a huge campaign to get rid of Joe, even though the company was doing great. The shareholders have absolutely no say. There was no shareholders meeting. There wasn't even a meeting of the board because on the board, the guy who wanted to get rid of Joe got outvoted. So he went and just pulled a legal, says, screw it. I control the company. Joe's out. So big mistake in my part, but it also, from my view, but it also showed the problem of the lack of true power and governance in traditional corporations under capitalism. Now, so basically what happens is that every time an asset is sold, a very small fee goes into a common wallet. And in that common wallet, depending on how many of these tokens you own, you get to have a say in the share of the company. Now, we can get into this more because we're up to here at the Blockchain Research Institute doing work in these new models of governance in a decentralized world. This is a very different thing, and it's unlike anything that we've seen before. And at the Drucker Forum, I said, you know what? Peter Drucker was a great, brilliant management scientist, and he viewed management within the paradigm of a corporation that has boundaries, that has traditional models of management and governance, that has hierarchies, sometimes it's vertically integrated. But the corporation, as we know it, is changing very fundamentally. And you have these radical new models that are occurring. So who here knows about the DAO? Anybody? The DAO? Everybody? Hands? Okay. Sort of a funny story on this. We wrote this up in Blockchain Revolution. Go back and read it. We called it a distributed autonomous enterprise. And we said you could have a company with no CEO, no management, no people on a blockchain. And we almost didn't publish it because we thought it was so radical, fine line between vision and hallucination. But we published it, and 2 weeks later, this thing called a DAO got created. And I'm not saying they read our book and did this. this concept had been floating around in kind of esoteric Ethereum circles prior to that. And Vitalik, I think, had even used a word similar to that. But you've got now some examples that are quite extraordinary. And in some of these platforms, the common wallet, which is equivalent to the treasury in a traditional corporation, become significant things. So Uniswap has $9 billion in its treasury. Do you know that's a bigger treasury than every company in the United States, except the top sort of 20 largest companies? And who's Uniswap? If you ask your typical person who's Citibank, they're going to tell you who it is. Uniswap is a bigger treasury than Citibank. So this is a really extraordinary thing. And by the way, we're going to have to reinvent management science. And we're doing a big project right now. So what does it mean to manage and govern a decentralized network? Not an extremely decentralized one that has no people. By the way, do you know that as I speak, money is being raised for a DAO to purchase the US Constitution, or a copy of it, one of the few copies. And it was going to auction in private hands. They figured they'd get 20 million. This DAO has raised, when I checked a day and a half ago, $40 million. And they're going to own one of the copies of the Constitution. I'm betting on them to win the auction when it comes up shortly. Okay, the next type of token is NFTs. Now, again, Blockchain Revolution Chapter 8 was about the digitization of art. And we called them crypto collectibles. And we said, you know what? In the past, if you had a piece of digital art, it had no value because of the double spend problem, right? It could be replicated. Now, because of blockchain, a piece of digital art is like the Mona Lisa. You can try and knock it off, but there's only one Mona Lisa. It's non-fungible. It can be exchanged, and a unit is a fungible unit is the same as any other unit. Bitcoin is a Bitcoin. A franc is a franc. Well, this is an extraordinary thing, and this is a big market. OpenSea's August volume was $3 billion. I have to update that. It's a big exchange for this stuff. All right, the next one, we get the LCX, exchange tokens. I think you're an exchange token. And this is a very interesting category because exchange tokens are basically like loyalty points on steroids. That'd be one way of thinking of it. And you can use them inside centralized applications, often cryptocurrency exchanges, and you get access to certain benefits, maybe discounts on trading, access to greater liquidity, access to new issues, new things that you might want to invest in, and so on and so forth. So the biggest one, or the biggest of these central exchanges is Binance, but there are others, FTX, Huobi's based in China, LCX, and this is a big market. Basically, you have Binance, where its exchange token is twice the size of NASDAQ in its value. So these are like a really important thing, but one of the tough issues is to try and get exchange tokens that are fully trustworthy and can be regulated, and that, of course, is one of the great things that LCX was able to do. All right, we're getting near the end. Securities tokens. All assets are becoming digitized or represented by a token. And the really big one, the 900-pound gorilla of financial assets, is securities. So think about it. The market for all crypto assets right now is what? $2.5 trillion. Well, the US stock market is tens of trillions of dollars. Apple alone is the size of crypto. So securities is the really, really big one here. And there was this extraordinary token generation event, used to call them ICOs, bad name because they're not all coins. a token generation event before the pandemic that was over $1 billion US. There was no investment bank, there was no stock market, and there was no stock. People bought tokens that represented an interest in the company. And well, why would you want to do that? Well, right now, buying stock, there are all kinds of fees, there's delay, there are all kinds of problems with authenticity. And by tokenizing securities, not just stock, but anything, derivatives, all kinds of financial instruments, we can move them easier, we can store them easier, trade them easier. We have 100% assurance about their ownership. And securities can also become smart because they're basically contracts. That's what they are, right? So that's a pretty exciting one. And then we have number 7, which is stable coins. So sometimes when you're doing some kind of transaction, you want to do it in a currency that's not going to fluctuate in value. Now, the arc of all of this is positive, and generally, if you do a transaction in Bitcoin and you hold on to it long enough, it's going to go up. But sometimes it doesn't, and sometimes the fluctuation is a problem for doing short-term transactions. So you need a coin that's pegged to something that has a stable value, typically the US dollar. Stable coins were worth $1 billion 3 years ago. They're now at 125 billion. Last time I checked, which was over a month ago, it's probably way up from there. And Facebook was creating a corporate stable coin called Libra, then BM. But basically, because everybody hates Facebook and they're under a huge attack, a regulatory attack, they kind of threw in the towel and they embraced a thing called Paxos to do, because Mark Zuckerberg still, on this one, he's got a good vision. He thinks that sending money should be as easy as sending a text. And right now, this is $1 trillion industry where a housekeeper in Zurich sends money to her mom in the Ukraine or wherever, and it takes 47 days. She gets charged 10 to 20% on foreign exchange. This is actually a form of ripoff. I can't think of a clearer term than that. I just bought some stuff in one of the last countries I was at, and I went to the duty free, and the person doing the transaction for me charged 33% of the benefit that I was getting back just to do a simple thing as easy as sending an email. You ever heard of a cross-border email payment? No, I mean, so this would be a really awesome thing if Paxos were to succeed, I think, because it'd bring 500 million people into the global economy. But this is a big threat to a lot of traditional institutions. So you think about something like SWIFT, the big global clearinghouse, is basically using 50-year-old technology to exchange a bunch of messages. I'll go on the record saying SWIFT is toast. Unless maybe it can become a standards body or something else, but everything SWIFT does can be done by software on a blockchain. Now, stable coins are another one that's taking off. You'll notice the shape of all of these charts I'm showing you. The 8th one is what we call natural asset tokens. And these are basically a way to express the value of a physical good using a digital good. And so it could be a diamond as a natural asset. The one that I'm super interested in right now is carbon credits because, you know, Houston, we have a big problem around climate change. So we need to solve this problem. Now, how are we going to solve it? Well, COP26 didn't solve it. Maybe COP27 will, or COP28. Boy, by the time we get to the end of the 30s, something good has got to happen there, right? No. We actually need to mobilize planet Earth, not just every state, every local government, and every school, and every entrepreneur, and every NGO, and every big corporation, and every kid, and every schoolyard, and every family sitting at a table. We need to reindustrialize planet Earth. How are we going to do that? How's the world going to get mobilized to do that? Well, it's not going to be because Greta Thunberg, bless her heart, gives another speech. It's going to be through economic incentives. And by providing a global platform of liquidity and exchange for carbon credits. Well, tokenize a carbon credit. We can talk about that if you want. And then the final one is central bank digital currencies. And this is happening, but it's being driven by China. China's DCEP is being rolled out across Southeast Asia into Africa, One Belt, One Road, linking Hong Kong and Rotterdam. Unless the rest of the world wakes up, the Chinese RMB will become the currency of record. This is a wonderful collaborator of ours named Chris Giancarlo, was head of the CFTC, right? That's the SEC and the Commodities Futures Trading Exchange Commission. And he's leading the Digital Dollar Project. And again, good topic for conversation, but his view is the US has got to do this, otherwise the world's currency will be have a partner called Big Brother. And that we need to have the US, he says, become the currency, stay as the currency of record and protect privacy and rights and intellectual property and all the rest. Mark Carney, the head of the Bank of England, had a different view. He says, no, we should go back to Bretton Woods and have a global currency. And all these digital currencies, the digital franc, the digital dollar, and everything should roll up into what he called a global synthetic hegemonic cryptocurrency or something like that. That's a tough sell right now in the world, especially to the US Fed. But this is moving very, very quickly. So 9 types of digital assets. Let me close. People, this is a great chart. It was created by Alex. Oh, FinTech, that's the future, right? Actually, no, FinTech is not the future. FinTech is the past. The future is DeFi, distributed finance. DeFi is the fastest growing industry ever, probably. And if you look in terms of the number of users or also the asset growth. Look at this. This didn't exist a year ago, really. So what does this mean for the banks? And again, we have a number of big banks. We have Bankers Association. I'm speaking to the Liechtenstein Bankers Association on Monday. And I'm going to talk to them about disintermediation. And when I wrote The Digital Economy, in '94, I said, I think if you're in the information industry, you can be disintermediated. And the example that I used was bookstores. I said, they're in the middle between publishers and readers. They're going to go away. But then I introduced this other idea called re-intermediation, another great term that didn't exactly become a household word. But I said, I think there's an opportunity to create new value in the middle that may be bigger than the old middle. I said, but I think the rule of re-intermediation is going to be that the leaders of the old middle will have great difficulty embracing the new middle. So we can see that playing out today with some exceptions. Fidelity Digital Assets, led by Tom Jessup, extraordinary. JP Morgan is kind of all over this. Notwithstanding some of Jamie Dimon's statements. But this is an historic challenge to the traditional financial institutions or any institution that deals with assets, and that's way beyond financial services. And will they find the leadership for change? I actually spent a little time pulling together some famous last words. Television won't be able to hold on to any market it captures after the first 6 months. Guy from 20th Century Fox. I'm old enough to remember Ken Olsen, the CEO of Digital Equipment Corporation. Does anyone even know a company called Digital? Do you know they were the largest computer company in the world in 1977? They're that much bigger than IBM. there was no reason for any individual to have a computer in his home. It was a mini computer company. Turns out there's no need for mini computers once the PC appears. So this is the problem of paradigms. And I'd be happy to give you this analogy if you want, but I just want to end this up because we've been talking, I've been talking for quite a while. This is a paradigm shift. I'm allowed to use that word. Okay, I wrote the book. But I didn't invent the idea. That was Thomas Kuhn, The Structured Scientific Revolutions from the 60s. But a paradigm is a mental model. They put boundaries around what we think. They constrain our actions. They're often based on assumptions that are so strong that we don't even know they're there. You know, the earth is at the center of the universe. The big problem in the world is communism. Remember that one? Money is a thing. We need banks to manage our financial transactions and the creation of wealth. Well, something can come along in art, science, culture, whatever, that causes a new paradigm to emerge. And when that happens, you typically get a leadership crisis. And vested interests fight against change, and leaders of the old have great difficulty embracing the new. So Galileo had a rough life, trying to convince the church that the earth wasn't at the center of the universe. Does anyone know roughly when Galileo was exonerated? It was 25 years ago. The Pope said, Galileo's right, we're a planet, we're actually rotating around the sun. That was 25 years ago. So, is it possible to imagine a world without banks? No, but in theory, everything that banks do, and we're happy to talk about that too, can be replaced by this technology. So how are we going to find the leadership for change? I'd be happy to talk to you about what we're doing. This is our mission, to fill the gap between the potential and the actual deployment of this technology. We've got a bunch of great companies, including LCX, that are members of the BRI, about 100 of them, actually. And they typically pay a couple $100,000 each. And that gives us a big pool of money that enables us to do the definitive investigations of opportunities, problems, challenges, and so on. And so that's what we're doing. And I'm not going to go through this, but we have this big research program, 120 projects. And then we have the big online course, management course on blockchain, which 4 years later is growing in registrations on INSEAD or through INSEAD, and it's done on Coursera. We have one called Blockchain and Financial Services that's taking off. The pandemic bumped that stuff up big time. Webinars, newsletters, and so on. We do a bunch of peer collaboration. We have big events. And we also try and clear mud off the windshield. And we try and be influential in the world. One of the reasons is that the number one impediment to this whole thing happening is traditional regulatory environments that are built for an old paradigm. Please come to our event, April 22nd in Toronto. It's going to be a physical event. And we've got a great list of speakers shaping up. One of our commitments is that 50% of the people on stage will be women. And it'll be chaired by Angie Lau, who is the CEO of Forecast News, which is the best source of day-to-day news around all this stuff, in my view. We just held the Enterprise Blockchain Awards, and we did it using beaming ourselves onto a stage in a metaverse. And if you go to Enterprise Blockchain, actually, you just go to this site, Blockchain Revolution Global, and I think it's up now. You'll be able to see that award ceremony. It's quite extraordinary. Angie was beamed from Hong Kong, and Alex and our head of education were beamed in from other locations. And I mentioned this. We got this big program, and we also have a series of books. So I think I'm just going to kind of wrap it up there. Can this be done? again, I was asked that yesterday. Is this going to happen? I said, you know what? The future, in my mind, is not something to be predicted. It's something to be achieved. And it's all about finding the leadership. And I got to throw a big kudos to Monty here, who somehow got beyond the old paradigm in thinking about all of this and was able to found and create an extraordinary company. And this is going to happen. How it plays out, we'll see. But we shouldn't see as passive observers. We should create this change. And as we, just to close, as we said, that, you know, the Internet of Information created a bunch of problems, did some great stuff too. I can FaceTime with my little grandchildren, but created a fragmentation of public discourse that led to the complete crisis of legitimacy of the American democracy. It created a bifurcation of wealth, as you have a new group of digital conglomerates that now owns the asset class of the digital age. The problem with these 5 digital conglomerates, or 6, is not just that they're monopolies, it's that they are increasingly owning the economy. Those 5 companies own half of NASDAQ. They own 23% of the entire US stock market, the S&P 500, top 500. So anyway, on and on. We have a bunch of problems created by the internet, and this new technology is not going to solve any of that. But once again, the genie has escaped from the bottle, and it was summoned by this anonymous person or persons in 2008 with uncertain motives at a very difficult time in human history. And it's not going to solve our problems, but it gives us another kick at the can, basically, to rewrite the economic power grid and the old order of things, but only if we will it. So I went a little much longer than I wanted to, but thanks very much.
Thanks. You know, one quote we like so much, we put it on our merch, which is, blockchain is to the money what email was to the letter. And it kind of sums up what you had been talking about with the blockchain revolution. Let's take 3 questions here from the audience, and we'll wrap up our YouTube live. So who wants to ask the first question here? Who goes first? Here.
Just a question about the news this week that the Swiss digital exchange went live. So they claim to be the first regulated digital exchange. The SIX, the parent, the Swiss Stock Exchange, took the opportunity to list a 150 million Swiss franc bond. It's listed on both exchanges. There's 50 million on the Swiss SIX exchange and the 100 million tokenized blockchain-based digital listing. What do you see as the future success for digital exchanges owned by governments, stock exchanges, or individual initiatives from entrepreneurs?
Yeah, great question.
You go ahead.
So we noticed this had been happening. The SDX, the Swiss Digital Exchange, had been prepared since a very long time with some ups and downs and struggles. But these digitalized bonds had been out there since years. So blockchain-based bonds had been I think the first one had been coming out by the World Bank with 100 million, 2017. Then I saw some 2018. And now again, also a blockchain bond. This is kind of a learning curve. I would describe it that this is a learning curve of the old traditional ways of, let's digitalize what we already have. And it's getting closer to the other side, what Don had been describing with all these different tokens and DeFi, which is much, much bigger than these bonds. But it kind of, the industries are getting closer to each other. At the moment, these bonds does not have any impact to the crypto economy yet, because they're not tradable. They're not even exciting for most crypto traders yet. But they're like steps where we see the talks by central banks, talking about central bank digital currencies. These are important talks to have. but still it doesn't have the impact as this revolution which is going on and which is slowly like rolling over the financial markets from the back. What would you add to that?
I think that's a good answer. We used to call it paving the cow path, and but there is a role for governments stepping up and trying to innovate. So we wrote a big paper for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris on technology in the second era of the digital age. And we said, you need to rethink the entire technology strategy for the country, not just for blockchain within government and its operations, but you need to think about how do you build an innovation economy? How can you solve the crisis of legitimacy of American institutions? You ought to build this technology into voting. You can't have disputes over votes if it's on a blockchain, because you have cryptographic proof of the double spend problem being solved, that your vote was cast for the person for whom you voted, and it can't be moved to somebody else. You have smart votes, right, inside a smart contract. That'd solve a big problem, because right now politicians aren't responsible to represent to citizens. They're responsible to the people who funded their campaign. 94% of Americans believe in a background check for firearms, but Congress can't pass a law saying that because they're not responsible to citizens, right? So if you had a smart vote, you vote not just for the person, but for the program. And if the politician doesn't implement the program, there are consequences. Funds don't fly and so on. So and our view is government should reinvent themselves using this technology, everybody, including exchanges. Will they do it? Will they do it in a completely new and innovative way? Well, that's one where the future is certainly not something to be predicted. But overall, I welcome stuff like this, because it's a rising tide, basically, that lifts all boats. And I wouldn't view that as a threat to LCX, because right now we're dealing with a market this big when it should be, the size of this room. So I would say congratulations for them. Try and do it even better. That'd be my view.
Next question.
How do you see the regulations coming for exchanges? So LCX is regulated, but how do you see other exchanges globally have so much impact on the financial system that are not regulated?
How's it in Canada?
There aren't any. And the regulatory environment is very difficult. You got an old paradigm of financial service, and you got laws and regulators and traditional policies and systems and enforcers and all the rest locked into an old model. So you can't do a token generation event. The United States, you can't do an ETF, a Bitcoin ETF. Why on earth would the SEC not approve a Bitcoin ETF? Or an Ethereum ETF, or a bundle of technologies and platforms that's in an ETF. So again, it's the old paradigm bumping up against the new one.
You're allowed to gamble. You can't buy an ETF. So.
Yeah.
But adding on to that, building an ETF is is an interesting idea from the old world. But who needs an ETF if you can just buy Bitcoin directly? Yeah.
Well,
so there's no point of having it. So the role of exchanges are super important, because they will give access to this new digital asset class. There's no need for an ETF. It's like the fax machine before email came. Of course, you can send a letter digitally, but why scan it if you can just do an email? These are like transitional technologies which are needed, like a stable coin, maybe, but they're not necessary in 10 years or 15 years or longer.
Yeah, I mean, in principle, I agree with that. The fax machine was a lot better than sending mail, though. And it was a sort of transitional thing for a lot of people, especially ones that were afraid of using a keyboard. And they could have their secretary insert something into it. A lot of people are still afraid of using a wallet. But over time, absolutely, that's where this whole thing is going, I think.
Yeah, it's a tipping point, actually. So there are now these fully regulated stock exchanges Then there's the fully unregulated crypto exchanges, and there's an LCX establishing a new market where like others are also like following us. I would say Coinbase for sure, Kraken. But if you then look at the current landscape, most of them are avoiding regulation, and I think that's like good to do business right now, but it's not on the long term, not very sustainable. And of course, we have the ability to leverage the Liechtenstein laws. You will also educate some of the bankers there tomorrow. But now Liechtenstein becomes a role model for other jurisdictions, and we're not stopping there. So we will do more outside of European jurisdiction as well. Last question.
Where's dinner?
Where is the dinner? Okay, so we'll wrap it up. Thank you all. Don, you have to say goodbye here as well.
Okay.
Thank you all for joining.
Thanks, everybody. Platform revolution. Buy it in volume. Christmas is coming soon.
See you soon.
This is LCX Insights Live. For more insights, please visit lcx.com/insights and follow us on Twitter @LCX. Onwards and upwards.